All right, let's go ahead and get back to our guest tonight, Joel Garman. Joel, again, thank you so much for giving us some time tonight.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Pat. This is great.
I've got a couple questions that were posted through, and then I'd like to talk about your book and some of the things that we can do to move forward, and some of the ideas. One of the questions that we received during the break was to get your thoughts on Fukushima. The reactor appears to still be leaking, while the government there seems to be quieting things down. Also, the caller indicated, and again, wanted to get your feelings and thoughts on this, that the media has been stifled, very much so, where they don't want anybody talking about this accident. Can you maybe share some of your thoughts on Fukushima?
Well, first off, I think this was just a tremendous disaster. And this is something that will have ramifications on not only the Japanese people and the ocean food chain in the Pacific, but also will continue to influence our own shores here, because we receive that current that comes across the northern Pacific from Japan. And so it influences the food chain that certainly, people who are eating fish or any airborne pollution that can come over and drop on our soils, on our grasslands. It's something that is not localized to just Japan. And I think that your caller who provide that their opinion on this is very much accurate, in that there's been suppression of this story. It's like it fell off the map. I mean, this is the biggest environmental tragedy ongoing on our planet, and pretty much it seems like for at least a year there's been almost no news about it. I've heard others report in some of the circles that I'm in that the U.S. and like the USDA, they don't want to have any measurements done on any type of radioactive compounds that might be detected in milk here, or even in the grass itself, or any types of food products that might come off of our soils, particularly here on the West Coast or in the Pacific Northwest, where we're most likely to get the airborne fallout, and really don't want to see measurements on fish either. So I think there clearly is a real clampdown on this, because there's powerful interests in play that are very seriously threatened by the whole pall that this throws over the nuclear industry at large. Because I think rightfully so, the public is alarmed when they see something like this happen, a meltdown. I mean, it's crazy. And our nuclear power plants in this country, and we have about 100 of them, they are equally vulnerable to these types of things happening. We have, it seems like there is more information that's been gained as activist groups have looked at this issue, that we have a lot of power plants that are in vulnerable areas as far as the geology and the earthquake vulnerability to power plants we have here in the United States. So we're not out of the woods just because we're not hearing anything about Fukushima anymore. We are vulnerable, and there's other vulnerabilities as well in the fact that so many of these nuclear power plants, their whole emergency backup plan for cooling water are dependent on an intact electrical grid, meaning that the grid still has to be fully functional in order for backup pumps and things like this to be functional. And, so if we had some other type of issue, let's say we had a big solar flare, coronal mass ejection, where it caused essentially a burnout of, portions of the grid, that leaves those local nuclear power plants very vulnerable to going critical. So it's a big problem. Maybe some of your listeners listen sometimes to George Norrie on his program, but I know that's a huge issue he talks about is hardening the grid against having some type of electromagnetic pulse, whether it comes from the sun, whether it comes from a nuclear exchange, or whether it comes from some act of sabotage. We cannot allow something like that to essentially throw us back into the Stone Age because of nuclear power plant meltdowns.
Right.
So Fukushima is there as a very intense lesson right in our face about we need to take action on these things. So I'm glad that your caller's aware of it, and hopefully they pay attention and get active about it.
Let's talk about your book, Joel, Breakthrough Power, and how that all came about.
So Breakthrough Power is, the story goes like this. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, there were a number of people who had been longtime researchers or scientists in the new energy field who I started to cross paths with. One of them is an investigative journalist named Gene Manning. And Gene Manning had written a book called The Coming Energy Revolution back in 1996. And at that time, she had reported in her book, The Coming Energy Revolution, about the number of breakthrough energy technologies that were being developed at that time, and that she fully expected would start to be released into the public domain by the year 2000. Well, of course, the year 2000 came and went, and nothing had happened. These things still were not coming out. And then we founded New Energy Movement in 2003 under the leadership of Dr. Brian O'Leary, who had been trained in the Apollo program as an astronaut in training. But Brian took a very active interest in educating about what was going on in breakthrough power, continually advocating for frontier science in the energy field, and basically after Gene Manning and I met through Brian bringing several people together to start New Energy Movement, Gene asked me if I would collaborate with her on a new book that would help to kind of update what's going on behind the scenes in new energy technology, and targeted even increasingly toward the mainstream public rather than the technical or scientific community. So we released the first edition in 2008, and it was received very well, and we received a National Book Award for Breakthrough Power. And then we released our second edition in 2011. And the field itself has been evolving very quickly. In fact, it's sometimes difficult to keep up with all the things that are going on in the breakthrough energy field. But there's a lot of promising developments going on, and I'd love to talk to your audience about a few of them.
Yes, yes.
So most people have heard the term cold fusion before, and some have maybe just thought, oh, well, that's something that caused a big flack back in around 1990 and then disappeared. Others might say, oh, I've heard about that in a movie or a cartoon or something, and what is that anyway? Well, cold fusion is a discovery that was made in Utah by two electrochemists at the University of Utah, Martin Fleshman and Stanley Pons, in 1989, in March of that year, 26 years ago. They had made this discovery when they were doing a fairly simple electrolysis experiment where they had essentially a beaker of water that was enriched in a certain form of hydrogen, and that type of water is called heavy water, where it has an isotope of hydrogen called deuterium that is in the water molecule. And they had a special electrode in this experiment made of palladium, and then essentially they're just running current through the electrodes, and when you do this, when you electrolyze water, it splits into hydrogen and oxygen, very, very standard chemistry. And what they found was that after several days, that this process started to heat up and started to release an excess amount of heat that could not be accounted for by the amount of electrical energy that was going in through the circuitry. and through the electrodes. And this was a very anomalous condition to see this excess heat. Well, it was very exciting to them. They felt that they had uncovered a new type of energy generating process. And very quickly they released their findings to the world, made a major press release, and very quickly they were on the front cover of a number of magazines, and they were evening news. In fact, I remember when they first appeared on Time magazine, and this was, game-changing discovery here. And essentially, people were postulating, was this the end of oil, this cold fusion process? Well, very quickly, the mainstream science community, especially the nuclear physics community, just stomped this out. In fact, within just a month or two, Fleischmann and Pons were so heavily criticized and castigated by the academic community and many of whom had their own vested interests in their own energy science, particularly the conventional nuclear community. Essentially, they were blackballed from academic science. And the reasons for that are several, but primarily it was because a number of researchers at other universities, and including universities like MIT, said that they could not replicate the results, and so it was not verifiable science, and therefore it was being classified as junk science, that either the researchers, Fleischmann and Pons, had not properly conducted their experiment, or the data readings that they had taken were in error, or some other types of extrapolations from their data were not up to snuff. And so basically they were faulty. So that was happening, all this criticism and real stomping out of this whole potential technology, while at the same time other researchers around the world were indeed getting successful replication of the experiment and yielding or getting these yields of excess heat off of the device that could not be accounted for by the electrical input. So while here mostly in the U.S. shores, it was being castigated as junk science, in many, many other countries, including Italy and Japan and others, they were having a very, very serious examination of this cold fusion science as a real energy source. And they were not so quick to pronounce the dogmatic end of cold fusion. Well, this is going back to 1989. Well, now here we are, here in 2015, 26 years later, and there still is some debate on cold fusion, but really it's not so much about whether it's real, it's, okay, what's the best process to use? Right. Because even our own U.S. naval labs and other national laboratories have now verified that the technology itself is real. The problem is we've lost a quarter century here while most conventional science has criticized it and won't even look at it, okay, because they think that the stamp out effort was so successful, going back those few decades, that it became a very, very delicate topic in academic science, and a hot potato that no one who really valued their career in science wanted to take on. So it's pretty much been, let's just leave that on the shelf. But there have been very, very good advancements in the field. There is what I would consider the leading cold fusion genre of technology. Has been developed by a researcher named Andrea Rossi. He's an Italian researcher. Others have replicated his process now, including a Russian researcher whose name is Alexander Parkhomov. And essentially what they're finding in this process is that it's different than the original cold fusion experiment of Fleischmann and Pons, where they were running electrical current through water and electrolyzing it Instead, the processes that are favored now are taking powdered nickel and putting that in the presence of a form of hydrogen, and usually using a solid fuel form of hydrogen called lithium aluminum hydride. And these are essentially these reactants, the powdered nickel and this lithium aluminum hydride. They are held in a container, a very small, little device. It's basically a ceramic device that can withstand very high temperatures. And then the device is electrically heated until it reaches a certain critical temperature at which the hydrogen is released from the solid fuel and can react directly with the powdered nickel. And something very interesting happens in that reaction where a lot of excess heat is released. And generally the measurements are showing about 3 times as much output energy as heat compared to the electrical energy that's inputted to get the reaction up to that critical temperature. And so now that there have been successful replications of this, including a month-long experiment done by some Swedish researchers, also doing that research in Italy, the community that's been following this, there's just no doubt that the science itself is real. It's just now a matter of deciding, what's the best way to engineer the technology so that it can actually be introduced as a commercial form of reliable power. So it's very, very exciting.
It is.
It's a type of thing where probably within 2 to 3 years there will be commercial cold fusion reactors, and those would be deployed first, likely in industry or larger scale commercial processes where they need full-time heat as part of their process. And sometime later it would make its way toward the consumer market, but that's probably a fairly long way off, certainly more than 5 years in my estimation and in the judgment of some close colleagues. Certainly it'll be first in the industrial applications because that's where you can have not only round-the-clock power generation, but you can have skilled technical and maintenance people there monitoring the process, making sure that it's well monitored, and if there is a hiccup, that they're there, they can address it. Yeah, and certainly from the standpoint of the scientists who develop the process or the people who actually have the commercial enterprise that's manufacturing the technology, they don't want to take the risk of having this very young technology go into a lot of consumer homes and small businesses, and then there be some type of unforeseen quality defect or something else happen that causes some harm. Maybe something malfunctions and it causes a small fire, or somebody gets hurt because a part couldn't withstand the heat and it shattered or something, and someone got hurt. Well, you can just imagine what would happen with something called cold fusion, which is certainly associated with a nuclear type of process, and suddenly, a person, someone's home burned down because their cold fusion reactor. I mean, it would just kill this thing overnight. Those who have a vested interest in conventional energy generation would just pounce all over that and turn it into such a brouhaha that it would just shut down a fledgling industry. It makes much more sense to deploy these things first in these industrial scenarios where you have maintenance personnel and round-the-clock operations, and it's kind of nurtured there before it's ready for public consumption.
We got some emails in, Joel. We've got an engineering group up at the University of Utah that listens to our show every Saturday night. They've been faithful listeners for many years. And Tracy writes in, she says, Joel, some time ago there was an article in a couple of different papers talked about Bill Gates buying the patent rights to these fuel cells. Can you explain what a fuel cell is?
Depends. I'm not really familiar with which article she's talking about, but there are different types of fuel cells well, generally what a fuel cell is it's a process that uses hydrogen or another type of usually a gaseous fuel like methane, or natural gas. And what it's doing is it's combining that hydrogen or the natural gas with oxygen in the process and generates electricity directly. Okay. So that's essentially what a fuel cell is doing. You're not really using it like a conventional combustion process where you're burning a fuel like natural gas or gasoline with oxygen and then producing heat and then using that heat to do something. All right. In the case of a fuel cell, you're using the reaction between the fuel and the oxygen to produce an electrical effect and generate electrical power directly. There's a company called Bloom who had introduced the Bloom box some number of years ago, and they got a lot of play, like on the TV program 60 Minutes. They had a lot of Silicon Valley backing from some of the heavy hitters down there in the venture capital community. And so they started to get probably the earliest traction as far as installing these fuel cells. They're stationary fuel cells. These weren't things that were part of any type of vehicle, but they were stationary installations. The Bill Gates reference that your group mentioned here, I'm not really familiar with that so much. It would not surprise me, though, that Bill Gates would get into the emerging energy field because something else that happened recently, in fact in December apparently, was Bill Gates went to Italy and had a briefing on the cold fusion scene going on in Italy. And there's other credible sources that say that he is now also funding some of these cold fusion developments as well. So, and that wouldn't be surprising to me. In fact, that would be, I'd be very surprised if he wasn't highly aware of what was going on in the alternative energy field.
His water purification plant was sure interesting. The one they put over in one of the third world countries where they can take the waste and produce clean, usable drinking water. The technology's out there. We just, you need the money to drive it. The one thing, Joel, that I remember, for years, even as a kid, and when I look back, like looking at Popular Mechanics, and every now on the internet, you'll see these things pop up, especially if you start looking, if you look at sites related to yours, send for your free literature on this amazing power box, never pay a power bill again. Are there technologies out there right now that are not approved? Have people successfully made, if you want to call them, energy-making machines, electrical-making machines that you can put in your backyard and can power your home? Or do you think a lot of that's just a come on and you got to be careful of a scam artist for right now?
Well, certainly right now you have to be very, very careful. And it's not to say that there have not been and are today some technologies that could indeed do just that, power a home. The problem is that a lot of these have been scams, and a lot of the technologies themselves that may be very real have not been properly vetted by third-party verifications. And so anyone who is examining these things or these claims has to be very, very careful about that. Now, I've been in the position where I've, met a lot of inventors. I've been able to see a lot of different types of technologies, and I know for a fact that many of these are real and have tremendous promise. There's a researcher and inventor out of Oklahoma named Jim Murray, who has a very promising technology that is kind of based on some of Nikola Tesla's principles, and he calls his technology the switched energy resonant power supply. Essentially what it is it's a magnetic motor. It's a rotating device that is using permanent magnets and a novel switching mechanism to essentially keep the device in motion and producing excess power. Jim Murray has an associate named Paul Babcock who replicated Murray's device and used Babcock's own patented process to do this type of switching. And he did a demonstration at a recent conference where he was getting more than 40 times the output electrical power compared to the input power. 40 times.
Wow.
Now that's eye-popping, and I think it is indicative of where this field is going. There are very real technologies. Generally speaking, the media and the mainstream science community and the public at large are unaware of these developments. There's been fairly minimal financial backing of these developments as well, because many of the investors, the heavy hitter investors, usually rely on technical advisors that come from the academic science community, and a lot of times, in fact, I'd say most of the time, those academic technical advisors are not well versed in what's going on in this field, and they tend to be very conservative and cautious about this, and are very quick to play the skeptic, and oftentimes don't even want to look at the data. So they'll dismiss these technologies. So it's been very hard to get the type of funding toward these initiatives that is deserved, and it's one thing that my group has been trying to do in our advocacy, and also leading an initiative to get some standardized testing protocols put together so that both the researchers and inventors can use very sound and well-articulated and well-documented testing protocols that they can test their own device, report on their results, and then invite the third-party verifying entities to come in, use those exact same test protocols to verify the device. And if those match up, now you've got something that you can take to the investment community and say, look, this is something that's real, it's been independently vetted, it's worthy of being financed now toward its latter stages to get this thing as a commercial product that can enter the public domain. So that's a very important initiative that we've embarked on here, kind of in its early stages, but the new energy community definitely recognizes that we need these standardized test protocols to help marshal these things along.
So people aren't just popping different things out of thin air constantly.
Well, let the buyer beware.
Right.
Yep. And we want to essentially get a stamp of approval on the devices that are real, and have it happen as quickly as possible, because we really shouldn't risk any of these technology developments being put into homes and businesses unless we're convinced that these have been rigorously tested, not just for their power output, but also for their engineering design and their safety, and really kind of be very circumspect about what is it that the public is interested in a consumer product. Exactly. We want things that are reliable, that work every time you turn them on, that are safe, that are basically affordable, and that are going to last. And those, that doesn't disappear as far as what the public wants just because something is very novel and has great potential. I mean, the engineering that has to go into these things is substantial to deliver and meet those requirements of the consumer.
Let me ask you this, Joel, if we could switch gears just a little bit. And this is in your notes too. Well, first of all, your book. Where can our listeners buy your book or purchase your book?
They can find Breakthrough Power on Amazon. It's easy to find it there. You can also go to the book's website, which is breakthroughpower.net,
how does let's talk about the governmental or big business utility company side play into this. If somebody can buy a machine that they can put in their backyard and provide all the power they could ever use, and now the demand for big energy isn't out there. Is that a concern with you and your group? Are they concerned about some of the implications there? Will we see taxation on these things? It'll be outrageous.
Well, it's already the big public utilities are very, well, and private utilities are very concerned about what's going on, even with the solar installations, the rooftop solar that's happening, and because really what it does is it starts to cause a few issues. One, cuts into the revenues directly because
Right.
people are generating their own power, and then two, when power is provided back to the grid, having those grid tie-ins and managing the flow in a way that doesn't disrupt the way the whole system works, which is very complex. Those are two very, very major concerns. So anything that is disruptive to business as usual is going to be perceived as threatening, and that's well understood, us all being humans.
Right.
So there'll be resistance to this. I'd like to think that it stays in the realm of fair play, but I guess kind of all bets are off because unfortunately the history in this field has been riddled with, well, some foul play and very active suppression of some of these breakthroughs. So part of the problem has been that when there hasn't been a big bright light shown on this field, it's been easy for rats to scurry around. One of the things that New Energy Movement tries to do is by educating the public and making people more aware of what's going on, it tends to bring more light into this. And we hope what that does is it encourages those who might inhibit the adoption and release of these type of technologies, that those forces actually, well, essentially say, okay, we see where this is going, become part of it to help move it along. And that's where I think things are going to go now. Undoubtedly, right now, Pat, breakthrough energy technologies are already being applied in black budget programs of various sorts, probably in space-related programs, possibly in weapons-related programs. I have no doubt that that's the case. And, so the technologies have been around for quite a while. What we are really seeking is that these finally get released to have a public benefit and an environmental benefit, and kind of raise the whole game on little planet Earth to take us to a new and healthier way of living.
Right. Exactly. Do you see? Again, kind of in the infancy of it, but if these items are rolled out, let's just say the energy machines can be delivered, do you see maybe governments saying, hey, look, let us get involved with it. We'll get these things installed on your homes just as they do today with power, or maybe it'll be a backup source of power, maybe offer a discounted bill or discounted services as to what we have today, and this can be a redundant unit, or it can be some sort of a backup generator type thing, if you will?
Well, I think that is a possibility. Certainly the way that wind and solar has gotten out of the gate has been through subsidies, and there's every good reason why that could be applied to one of these breakthrough technologies or several of them, and we would certainly welcome that type of buy-in by the government. We have not seen that right now. I think that many of if you kind of look at the history of this, and we talk about it in our Breakthrough Power book, is there has really been a lot of resistance to recognition of what's going on in this field by the government at large. I think a lot of that is because these things already have been well researched and deployed in military programs, not the ones that you would, hear about typically in the news, but in some more, I would say the Black Project type of programs. And if you some may be aware on your program, especially because you would talk about these types of things. There was released probably, I would say, 2 years ago, the announcement that hey, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has nearly 5,000 classified energy and propulsion technology patents that are not, they're basically not being released. They're pigeonholed. And now, why would that be the case? I mean, is it because they all are a concern for national security? Or is it because there's a lot of vested interests who really don't want to see the disruption to business as usual if these things are released to the public and the cost of energy essentially goes to almost nothing?
Right.
I think there's a lot of that.
No different than Big Farm, Joel, in the diet industry. I mean, I believe there's pills and remedies out there for a lot of deadly diseases, but imagine if they came forth with the cure for cancer tomorrow, could give everyone who has cancer a shot and it cures them, or whoever's overweight can take this one pill and they lose the weight. Can you imagine? Just look at that type of industry. It would buckle and fold overnight.
Oh, exactly.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah, I'll just mention it because I'm actually looking at it here in my own home library. There's a book called Your Own Perfect Medicine that speaks about the benefits of urine therapy. Sounds pretty like, oh, urine therapy, what's that? But it's amazing, and when you research it, how that essentially is a therapy that costs nothing. It's free, right? So that it would be no wonder if something like that, where it's such an easy therapy that everyone carries in them all the time, that is custom made for the individual because it's your own chemistry, and of course it costs nothing. Well, gosh, the medical industry, the last thing they would want to do is give any publicity to that. But it just kind of backs up what you're saying. The money interests here are very real. The stakes are high. People want to keep business as usual, but what I'm interested in is a planet that works, and that it works for everybody, a planet in a society that's aligned with life, and that doesn't worship at the altar of money, but really is driving toward a world that's more beautiful, that it's healthier, that we end up giving a lovely gift to our children and to our grandchildren instead of a toxic mess.
Right.
And we can do that. We just have to exercise the will to do it and dig in, do the work, and make this happen. We can do it. We've already got all the technologies we need. In fact, we wouldn't need any of the stuff that I'm even talking about here tonight. We could clean this world up if we just exercise the will to do it. And it's something where I think is going to happen. I can't really say when, but I know that there's so many dedicated people out there who really want to, they're holding a vision of this healthier, more beautiful world. They are giving of their time and energy and resources to bring it about, and there's an increasing number of people who are saying, you know what, I like that vision. That's where I want to go.
Exactly.
And so it's going to happen.
I had a chuckle. You were talking about the urine therapy. We had couple years ago. We had Andrew Norton Weber on the show. I don't know if you know who he is, but if you look him up, that was the most downloaded Fringe radio show out of our archive. We had over 100,000 downloads of that program. And
I'm not surprised.
It's called Alchemy is Urine Therapy. It kind of hard to swallow, and I use that as a joke.
That's a good pun. But I will tell you this: I have experimented myself, as have several in my family, and it works. And I'll just leave it at that. But I'm an experimenter myself, being a scientist, and I'm not afraid to try new things.
Well,
and that is definitely a valid science and a valid therapy.
It was funny, Joel, because like I said, we had a lot of people tune in that night. And matter of fact, we're an independent radio station. The station owner actually listened, and he called me the next day, and he said, I found that very interesting, that interview you had last night. I said, yeah, well, hey, we have a caller. You want to take another quick call before we have to go? Okay. Caller, Good evening. Welcome. You are on with, well, I dumped him. Hopefully he'll come back. I hit the button twice. Sorry about that. Maybe I did. Maybe he dumped us. We'll see. Anyway, yes, I did find that interesting. And like I said, we had well over 100,000 downloads of that program. It is amazing, some of the self-remedies that are out there that while we kind of have that cringe factor, there's a lot more to it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Okay, we got him on the, let's try it again. Caller, you're on the air.
This is Harv. I called back.
Hey, Harv, what's up?
You must have been on line 4. Joel, bringing up urine therapy, I mean, it's incredible. The Greeks used to tax it. I mean, it has the closest molecular structure to hemoglobin. It's an incredible thing. Now, I experimented in myself, and I euphoric, I guess, would be the correct term, and healthy.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I have found that it was very effective on various, basically having any type of infections.
Yes, sir.
Some, skin type of things.
Burns, anything.
Even like fungal type of stuff. I mean, it's amazing for those.
The green boxes on construction sites, they sell the urea to companies that manufacture goods for your bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything you look at in your bathroom, it says urea on it. Where do you think they get it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, for a long time there was, like porta potty type of standalone
yes, sir.
facilities there, and I'm not saying that particular brand, but there were contracts by some of the major pharmaceutical companies to collect the urine and use that to extract the urea and other compounds to make, various pharmaceutical products.
Exactly.
And, that's well documented. Now, I'm not going to go into that, but I will transition to this: is that there is an energy technology that used urine called the urine battery. It was developed by a researcher from Chile named Dr. Nelson Camus. And in 1992, he won the Best of Show at the Pasadena Technology Expo with his urine battery. And he was demonstrating that, he was having people come. They'd donate discreetly a sample of their urine. He'd put it in the battery. He was generating electricity with it. And he demonstrated his technology in an electric car that was driven. It was a GM EV1, and had the drivers take it from San Francisco to San Diego using nothing but urine to power that. He licensed that technology for $5 million for a 10-year license with one of the major oil companies. In 1993, he got the technology back in 2003, and of course the oil company totally shelved it. They did nothing with it, even though that would have been a very highly disruptive new technology for powering vehicles. So urine's amazing stuff, and
sure is,
energy.
Man. Thanks for being there.
Thanks, bro.
You bet.
Have a good night, Herb.
Hey, man, I hope I didn't piss you guys off. All right. Sorry, I just had to. I had no choice.
Okay.
Come on.
All right. Talk to you
All right.
later.
Yeah.
They're, Yeah, there was a lot of comedy that went with that I got harassed about the next day, Joel, without a doubt. We've got to wrap it up in a couple of minutes, and again, Joel's book is called Breakthrough Power. You can get it at go to the website at breakthroughpower.net, and then of course newenergymovement.org is his energy movement website. Do you do any, Joel? Do you do any? Do you go around the country giving talks, or do you do any symposiums or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll be a speaker at the upcoming Contact in the Desert conference.
Okay.
At the end of May down in Joshua Tree, which predominantly is a UFO ET focused conference. This will be the first time they've invited someone to speak about the breakthrough energy field, so I feel honored to do that. I'll also be speaking at just next weekend in Vancouver, Washington, across the river from Portland, to the local chapter of the Institute of Noetic Science. That talk, though, will be related to a unique spring water that I've been investigating with another group that is showing a lot of amazing healing and supersensory experiences from the people who've been consuming the water. And so that's like a whole other area of research that I've been devoting some time to of late. It's fascinating. And in fact, people can find out about that at the website that's called healthyselfwater.com.
Okay.
Healthyselfwater.com.
Before we go, just real quickly, with your vision to get involved with this, do you believe it might have been extraterrestrial, Joel?
Well, my own feeling is that that the spiritual guidance that's available to us can take many avenues.
Right.
And whether it is coming from a divine source directly and speaking to us to whatever degree we are interested in listening, or whether it's coming through other personalities. For instance, I think most often spiritual messages are delivered person to person, and we serve as those messengers. And so could it come through some intermediary between the human level and the divine level? I'm open to that possibility. I think the more important thing is that when we feel called to do something that is going to result in a positive change and hopefully a transformation, and that we can join with others in doing something really amazing and rewarding, that, hey, let's listen to those impulses and let's really seriously consider taking on the challenge and just jumping into it. Right. And so I think just showing up and getting it done results in a great way to live. Exactly.
Well, Joel, again, I want to thank you for the time and love to have you back again and continue on more, because there's so much. And as this science moves forward, you'll be right on the edge of it, hearing about it, and would love to hear about some of the realities that we may see for the everyday consumer in our everyday lives above and beyond the military. But I want to thank you for giving us time on Saturday night, and good luck at Contact in the Desert and all your other endeavors. Again, it was an honor to have you on the program.
Thank you, Pat. You take care.
Take care, my friend. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.